My first Mega Man experience was thinking I was playing Mega Man 10 because I saw the X at the end and I thought, wow, I've missed a lot of Mega Man.
Every week, my mom would let me rent one game. And we would go there every Friday hoping to find Mega Man X. And it took about 3 weeks before I finally got my hand on it.
But Mega Man X was one of the first console games I ever played. It was by far the coolest game I had picked up.
And we played it for hours straight, just being completely blown away.
I played Mega Man X first on the PC. That was actually where I first encountered it. Yeah, lovely game. It was striking. I wasn't used to that kind of really action-packed side-scroller on PCs, which at that point in history were more associated with first-person shooters or with strategy games or flight simulators.
So when you experienced Mega Man X, were you already familiar with Mega Man?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
I've been playing Mega Man games for years, and I was excited to see him back.
Mega Man 6 came out the same year as Mega Man X.
Right, and Mega Man 7 a year afterward, and it's almost unprecedented. It's actually very important to the history of the video games that this went on through those console generations. Mega Man's had tremendous influence on this industry, and if we take Mega Man and then its evolutionary counterpart Mega Man X, they've both influenced in different ways. I mean, Mega Man with its smaller characters and its kind of really quick, very tight, lightning fast setup, it embodies you versus the stage designer.
Mega Man 1 is brutally hard.
Oh, yeah.
I remember my mother saying, like, you can't get another game until you beat this game. And that made me stay with that game for like an entire year.
The games are fundamentally similar over the course of that period. And the reason that we talk about Mega Man games with such reverence is that those stages are just so insidiously laid out and thoughtfully created to be just hard enough to drive us crazy, but not so hard that we feel anything but triumph when we finally overcome them.
As a kid, I don't think I really processed that when you go back and play a game on an older console with older hardware, that it's not gonna be the same. It's gonna be super different, way harder, way harder.
Yeah.
I thought Mega Man X was hard. Mega Man, the original games were so much harder for my 7-year-old brain to comprehend.
Yeah.
The most deadly enemy in any Mega Man game is not a robot master. It is not somebody standing on a cliff. It is falling in a hole, landing on spikes, or trying to traverse some kind of obstacle course of disappearing platforms and horrible things that are all coming to kill you.
As an artist and a lyricist, you want to put yourself into the character. And I feel like in the earlier games, you don't really feel what Mega Man's feeling.
It was really hard to tell stories on the NES. But all the way back in Mega Man 3, we were already getting little cutscenes. I mean, you think about, Proto Man just popping down and, do-do-do-do-do.
But where does Proto Man come in and where does Zero come in? So there's a great mythology in that.
It's strange to think about the fact that Mega Man has a mythos now,
a fairly complicated one, too.
Exactly. Mega Man had gone through a cycle where 1, 2, and 3 had just come screaming out the gate, and then I played 4 and really enjoyed it. And then as time passed and the SNES kind of overshadowed the NES, I became more interested in games that were designed for 16-bit platforms.
Now you're playing with power, superpower.
That was a big year for video games.
It was.
I think Super Metroid was out that year.
Yep.
Actually, really good year for the Super Nintendo.
It was a great year for gaming. A lot was happening. This is the era of Doom. This is the era of Civilization. This is the time that new genres of game are really coming into their own. We're having 4X become a real market, and we have first-person shooters in their infancy, and multiplayer gaming online is just beginning to get off the ground. But in the midst of that, we also have the apex of the 2D platformer of the classic era.
Mega Man X was such a different type of game. It felt like playing an action movie.
It definitely moved a lot faster, and it was something that we had to get used to, a lot of wall jumping and quick dashing.
It was fast-paced, it was action-packed, the characters moving around, jumping all over the place, shooting things with his arm cannon.
The Mega Man X series spans 3 console generations, starting on Super Nintendo, moving on to PlayStation and Sega Saturn, and ending up on the PlayStation 2. How did it evolve and change over the years and over the generations?
It's an almost unprecedented evolution. This does not happen very often with console video games. We have a constant, uninterrupted cycle of development. That's really what you pretty much have with these over 3 generations of hardware. But it also deals with the technical issues that came up when you were trying to create a game around those new limitations. If you don't change the pace at which the game functions, then it's going to feel wrong. If you use Mega Man 2 style designs, with Mega Man X size enemies and sprites, the game will not be fun. Very few franchises succeed in doing what Mega Man did with Mega Man X. It takes something excellent and it builds something that's nominally similar, but subtly revolutionary along the same palette.
So Mega Man X introduced the mechanic where the order that you would complete the stages could affect some of the other stages.
Yeah. I remember beating Chill Penguin, barely, and then go to Flame Mammoth's level, and all of a sudden you notice all the lava's frozen over. And as a 7-year-old or however old I was at the time, I was like, what? It like blew my mind. It was one of the coolest things I'd seen in a game so far.
Of the first batch of Mavericks, the Maverick bosses, which ones really stood out to you?
I remember Spark Mandrill because he was in the Mega Man Saturday morning cartoon, which I watched religiously. And there was an episode where Vile, Spark Mandrill, and then Mega Man X went back in time.
Who is that bot?
Beats me, but he's on our side, so I gotta help him.
And this is the only crossover I've ever seen between the original Mega Man and Mega Man X, which was in this Saturday morning cartoon.
Thanks, I owe you one.
All in the line of duty.
Mega Man X introduced Zero, who went on to become a very popular character. When you were playing it for the first time, were you like, this guy's cool?
I was like, this guy is my favorite, and he is still my favorite to this day.
Zero's the coolest looking character I've ever seen.
He's got a cool sword, and who doesn't want a cool sword? You know,
Basically a lightsaber.
Exactly.
But I think seeing Zero and how cool he was, and I think that motivating you to keep playing the game, that hopefully he would pop up again.
You see the first Mega Man game, you can't play as him, and I think you play as him in X3, but X4 is the first time that I really took him out for a spin.
Even though you're locked into the full game once you choose one of those characters, it did give the game a lot of replay value, right?
Oh, yeah.
You can play it twice and it has totally different experience.
Absolutely.
I think it just took forever for me to even bother using X again. It was like, no, this is all about Zero now.
And particularly as you move on in the X games, Zero becomes very important. And finally, it gets his own series. I mean, it becomes so popular that he becomes a spin-off of a spin-off, which again is a very rare thing.
I read later that that was supposed to be the Mega Man X design.
Yeah.
And then I think maybe they just thought he was just too cool. So,
We can't even handle how cool this character
couldn't
is.
handle him.
Yeah.
Mega Man X had a story, it had characterization, it had this relationship between Mega Man X and Zero, and this battle against evil, and that's just one of the major impacts that it had on me as a filmmaker, and continues to have on me.
What? You didn't see that coming?
I hope to one day make something, some sort of live-action Mega Man-related content. That would be incredible.
The Mega Man games have some of the most iconic music of the 8 and 16-bit eras. The music of Mega Man has been very inspirational to you and your work as a musician, right?
A little bit, yeah.
All was well in a city of robots. Peace and love, no shots, no cops.
I remember taking an audio recorder and just hitting record while the game was paused in order to capture every level's music. So one side was maybe like the newest hip-hop songs I'd heard on the radio, and the other side was the entire Mega Man soundtrack. I wanted to try to take a little bit of the innovation that they had taken into video game music and try to bring that into hip-hop.
But you only live once, well I'ma disagree. Cause you can live forever and forever doesn't cease. Live through your creations and the people that you teach. So I live through my music eternally through the beats.
That led me to finding video game music festivals where people would just go to hear old music, and Mega Man always being such a big part of it. And the personality of Mega Man, I think, is what led to me creating all the crazy content that I've gotten to do.
Mega Man is over 30 years old.
Whoa!
He's really a man now. What do you think it is about the character that endures to this day?
Mega Man is the ultimate embodiment of taking somebody, putting yourself into them, because when I play Mega Man and when you play Mega Man, we are playing fundamentally different experiences.
I think with Mega Man 11 coming, the newer generation of gamers that'll get to experience it for the first time, they're gonna love it. I'm really almost jealous that they're gonna get to see this and have that feeling that I felt all those years ago.
There is one little quirk in Mega Man, maybe it's an oversight from Dr. Light, but he can't jump without opening his mouth. It's always just, even when he slides, right?
I would have my mouth open too if I slid. I'd be like,